Hello everybody. I would like to introduce myself. I am Sam McCracken, and I'll tell you about what I've done in my lifetime. I'm almost 90 now, so I've had a long life, and I've learned a few things. And I'm making this video because of the students that are located in Brockett, and also those who are located in the Blood Reserve and Standoff. This video is aimed at the high school students. Let me tell you a little bit about myself first. As I just said, I'm almost 90. So I was born a long time ago during the Depression that your grandparents might possibly remember. Your great-grandparents definitely will. I was born when it was minus 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And on the day that I was born, my father froze both his feet and did some damage to his hands as well. We won't go into that one too much, other than to say that I grew up in northern Ontario, where it got cold, and where we had to walk. In my particular case, at times, I was walking almost 4 miles to school. I started out my schooling a little bit late in a place called Tomstown. It was located on a river, the Blanche River, that at one time had boat traffic up and down. It was a big river, bigger than the Elbow or the Bow River. Actually bigger than the Old Man River by quite a bit. And that's the one that you'll know about more than anything else. Anyway, I went through school. We were not a rich family. We lived for a while, we lived in a tar paper shack. The reason there was tar paper was to keep the wind from coming in between the cracks in the boards. So we grew up being frugal, recycling things, making do. Got to be pretty good at that, because we had to be. But it was, one of the people I went to school with was named Jimmy Antler. I was 21 before I realized that Jimmy was an Indian. Oh, well, okay, he was Jimmy. End of story. I joined the Air Force when I was 18 because I had the dream of being a pilot. Now, I was not encouraged in this. People thought I was reaching too far. You'll never make it. You don't have the education, you don't have this, you don't have that. What I did have was the desire and the willingness to work. And I guess that's exactly what I want to tell you about today. You can have whatever dream you want. If you will work at it, you will probably make it come true. You can look around you right now and you can see the results of people that don't work at their dreams. They're on, generally speaking, alcohol. Quite often they're on drugs. And by and large, they're making a mess of their lives. And they're expecting you to put up with it. Now you have what a lot of people would consider as being a handicap. You were born into the Blackfoot Confederation, and as such, not too much is expected of you. Oh, you might become a truck driver. Well, you might become a waitress. If you really work at it, you might become a school teacher. I want to expand your horizons. In order to understand a little bit more about what I'm trying to do, maybe I should continue on with what happened to me. I joined the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1952, in 1952, and finished my flying training in 1953. In 1954, I went on to the operational training unit for the F-86 Sabre, which at the time was the top fighter aircraft of the free world. I think that is a good way of putting it. I was shipped overseas to France, right up against the German border. Now, I'll digress for just a second. I was part of the Canadian Air Division, which had 2 bases in Germany, and when I arrived, 1 base in England and 1 base in France, and I was on the base in France. And before I left France, there was a 2nd base opened up in France. So all 4 wings of the Air Division were located either in France or in Germany. I got to the point where I could make myself understood in German, and I did very well in French. Now that I've gone into this, I got out of the Air Force, and eventually I got into flying in the bush. I started out in the Northwest Territories and in the Yukon, and then and northern BC while I was at it. I guess part of it was in northern Alberta as well. But I eventually spent 4 seasons. Seasons were generally defined as that time of year when there was sunshine, in the high Arctic. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But in the course of all my flying up there, I met a lot of people. And I would like to tell you about 2 of them. The first one I want to tell you about is Stephen Frost. Stephen Frost was the son of Jack Frost. That's not a joke. That's the actual history. But Stephen decided that he wanted to do well with his family, so he learned to read and write. I was surprised to find out how he had done it. He had started asking people what was written on boxes. And he went on from there and he became our agent in Old Crow, up in the northern Yukon, just about right on the Arctic Circle. Just a few kilometers either way from the Arctic Circle. On a major river up there. Now that Stephen Frost became a very good friend of mine. I don't remember whether he had 8 or 9 children, he and his wife. He married her when he was 18 and she was 16. And she was a very intelligent lady and a rather good wife. The other person I want to tell you about is Robert Kaptana. When I met Robert, he had never been to school, and he would not be able to go to school because he was, at the time, he was 16, and his parents were starting to get a little bit older, and he needed to start hunting to support the family. He was Inuit, Eskimo, call it what you wish, but he lived up on Sax Harbor on Banks Island. And we became good friends. That was the first year that I met him. As I said, he did not know how to read or write. He wasn't going to have a chance to go to school. I saw him a few times. And then I started doing a regular scheduled run into Sax Harbor, and I got the surprise of my life. Robert had decided that he needed to learn to read and write. I got there in my airplane, and he said he was glad to see me. I was glad to see him. And he said, "Will you take a message into the radio station in Inuvik?" My parents are up at where they hunt the goose. Actually, it's where the geese molt, and so they're rather easy to take. And I want to send them a message. I said, "Sure." I said, "Just as soon as I finish cleaning out the airplane and put the door back on, I'll take care of it." So I did that. I got the mess out of the airplane, put the door back on, and I pulled my notebook out of my pocket and a pen and walked to Robert, who was leaning on the tailplane of the airplane that I was flying. And I said, "Okay, what message would you like me to take?" And he turned around and he handed me a piece of cardboard. He had written a message on it. It was perfectly understandable. Spelling wasn't that good. That didn't matter. He had written it. He had learned to read and write by asking people what was written on boxes. When I asked him about how he had learned to read and write, and he told me, I said, "You're the second person that I know that has done this." He said, "Who was the first?" I said, "My friend Stephen Frost." He always says, "I know him." They're only 1,000 kilometers apart, but they had met in Inuvik. Anyway, Robert went on from there to learn how to use computers, and he became a land claims negotiator for the Inuit. His sister, can't think of her name offhand, I had it just a minute ago, but anyway, his sister was the head of the Inuit Tapirasik in Ottawa. His younger brother was the guide for the first known polar bear grizzly cross that had been shot. It was the first time that anybody knew that there was such a thing. What am I telling you about? Why am I telling you about these people? They had dreams. They didn't take notice, well, maybe they took notice, but they didn't believe that they were limited in what they could do by what people said around them. That is my message. That you are not limited by what people think of you. You are limited only by what you think of yourself. You want to know just how to be successful? I can give you some pointers. I can't give you everything. You want to know? Yes, you want to know how to be successful. Well, the first thing is, as I've already said, is that you have to believe in yourself. You have to believe that this is possible. Then you have to be willing to work at getting that which is necessary to achieve that goal. If you have to learn mathematics, learn mathematics. If you have to learn photography, learn photography. If you want to be a mechanic, you learn to be a mechanic. You start out with fixing up bicycles, lawnmowers, and things like that. And then you go to college, Lethbridge College in your case, and you go through the course of becoming a journeyman apprentice, and then finally a journeyman mechanic. But I want you to go beyond that, because I'm going to go back to my friend Stephen Frost. By the way, I talked to him, it's now 3 years ago. I talked to him when he was going back home to die. He had stage 4 cancer. He was a bit of a shell of his previous self. He had been a champion dog musher, by the way. Anyway, I said goodbye to him, told him that he should get me a guest pass for heaven when he gets there. I don't know what happened to Robert Kaptana, because I haven't talked to him now for about 7 years. But he had gone on, he'd married a rather pretty girl. I had met her. And the two of them had 4 children, and they adopted 2 more. And he learned to sail. We're talking about not with a sail, but see, Sachs Harbor at one time had about a 3 to 4 week window where they could navigate over to the Mackenzie River and then up to Inuvik in order to bring supplies back for the year for Sachs Harbor. Well, he'd learned to do that. He'd also basically taken over the town because he had a vision of what he could do. And he and his wife established a bed and breakfast. Let's go back to Stephen. The community of Old Crow, I asked Stephen once, I said, why do the top dog mushers come from Old Crow? And he thought it over, and he said, I think it's because we don't have a beer parlor. Interesting. Well, eventually, somebody in Whitehorse had an idea. They wanted to establish an airline. The airline exists today. It's called Air North. When it was established, 47% of the financing came from Old Crow. They had a vision. The people there had a vision of how they could guarantee their future for their children, for the community, and they took it. Air North is a successful airline. I'm going to digress for just a second and say that in northern Quebec, there is an airline called Air Quebec. They bought from Porter Airlines. They bought the right to service the communities in northern Quebec. Why do I tell you this? Because when it gets right down to it, I want to introduce you to aviation. Now, aviation is not just pilots. It's not just flight attendants. It's not just mechanics. All those three are needed. Mechanics to keep the airplanes flyable, stewardesses to greet the passengers, take care of their needs and be there in case of emergency, and pilots to get you from A to B. But there are also those who handle things on the ground. Okay, I was interrupted by the phone there, and I apologize for that. Now, there are all sorts of people that are involved in aviation. There was an announcement about a year ago now, maybe a little bit more than a year ago, that the people who build the de Havilland, what used to be called the de Havilland -8, which is a twin turboprop medium haul airliner, were building an assembly plant, a manufacturing plant, east of Calgary. How many of you have even thought of qualifying yourself to get one of those good paying jobs? How many of you have even thought at all about aviation? Now, I've touched on something, I'm going to make it very blunt right now. Don't get into drugs, don't get into alcohol, and don't get into abusing others, whether they be girls or boys. Don't get into that. Concentrate on getting a dream and then working on it. And the final thing that I have to say about all this is that I am doing my best to arrange for familiarization flights out of Cowley on a glider. Somehow or other, I will raise the capital to have 10 slots available for rocket and 10 slots available for standoff. You can contact me. I will give you an email. It is Sandal, SANDAL 44 at yahoo.com. I will not be arranging for these things until the end of May 2024. But in the meantime, you can expect or you can express a desire to take advantage of this opportunity, and I will give you things to do, things to look at on YouTube, maybe even do some reading. You know, books are an amazing thing. They don't all have to be written by, found on Amazon.ca. They don't always have to be in your iPhone. They're pieces of paper with written information on it. Anyway, I would love to hear from you. I hope that you will take me up on this offer. And I wish all of you a very wonderful time of year. Christmas is coming up. Merry Christmas.